Chapter 36. As always, Mare whispered, her voice thick with emotion. You are a perfect principessa. With a trembling smile, Vittoria wrapped Mare in a warm hug. She closed her eyes, savoring the feel of Mare against her, of life, of presence, warmth, and existence. They were here, and that was all that mattered. Thank you, Mare. Sunlight flooded her apartment in Magnolia Castle and filled her with warmth all the way to her soul. The tile floor felt cool beneath her bare feet as she pulled away, giving Mare one last grin. Her satin dress slipped over the tiles as she scuttled over to her bed to grab her cloth shoes. Pear appeared from around the corner, perched proudly in his rolling chair and wearing a new blazer of emerald green. He stopped as soon as he saw Vittoria sliding into her slippers. Tears filled his eyes as he lifted a trembling hand to his mouth. Mazuna, he murmured, you are so lovely. Vittoria reached for him and clasped both of his hands in hers. Thank you, Pear. I am so happy. She reached up to touch her hair and make sure it hadn't fallen. Mare had brushed it, then coiffed it into a simple, elegant bun at the back of her head. Nothing dazzling. Today would stand on its own beauty. No need for anything elaborate. On this day of all days, Pear said with a little wink, you should be the happiest woman in all of Alkarra. Mare reached into a bowl, plucked a magnolia from it, and slipped it into Vittoria's hair with a little smile. La principessa deserves her flower on her day. Thank you, Mare. Mare stopped, put both hands on Vittoria's shoulders, and pulled her close again. Their foreheads touched, eyes closing. Thank you, Mazuna. You risked all to give us all. The givers have blessed you. Now we no longer need them. They are retreating to their own paradise and awaiting us. I can feel the peace they have left behind. She pressed a hand to her heart. You have freed your witches and your givers. Before Vittoria could respond, a voice screeched from around the corner. Eneko appeared, nearly colliding with Pear's chair. Sonara called out after him. I told you, she chided. You go too fast. You're going to hurt someone. With his adorable grin, Eneko skidded to a stop, eyes wide. The haphazard cloth tied around his neck was charmingly lopsided, and his once-combed hair was already disheveled. The lightest hint of sugar dusted his upper lip. Tori! Eneko called. You look really pretty. Sonara came up behind him with a weary but warm smile. She wrapped her arms around him. Indeed, she murmured. You are lovely, Vittoria. Thank you. Vittoria bent down to press a kiss to the top of Eneko's head. I don't think Mateo will ever be as handsome as you, however. Don't tell him I told you that. He won't. Eneko grinned. Vittoria laughed and bopped him on the nose. Someone has found the hidden treat jar, Eneko shrugged, affecting a bright, innocent smile. Not as humble as Mateo, she added with a laugh. Tell me, is Mateo ready? Eneko's head bobbed up and down. They're all ready, Tori, Sonara said, gesturing toward the hallway. A flutter of nerves overcame Vittoria's stomach, and she let out a long, slow breath. Is he waiting? Eneko's head bobbed again. Are there a lot of people in the room waiting also? They said I should tell you that it's ready to begin, but they can't, 'cause you're not there. He held up his hands. You gotta hurry. Vittoria grinned. Good. Tell Mateo I'm on my way, and then you can have another treat from the jar. She held up a finger. After the ceremony. With a whoop, he disappeared around the corner. Sonara followed sedately after, muttering something about busy boys. Vittoria smiled at her parents, gave them one last kiss, and watched them leave the room ahead of her. When Pear cast a look over his shoulder in question, she said, I'll be right there. Mare smiled warmly, took Pear's hand, and together they disappeared. Another attack of nerves in her stomach prevented her from leaving. She paused to glance around the room with a sense of undisguised awe that hadn't gone away yet. 3 weeks of living in the unburnt half of Magnolia Castle, and her wonder still hadn't abated. When a nervous tremor shivered through her stomach, she ran a hand down the simple satin and let out a long breath. Time to get this over with. In, Mateo had instructed her before, and out. 2 months ago, Mateo had ascended the throne as High Priest of the Eastern Network. Less than a day later, a peace agreement had been signed with the Central Network. 2 days after that, refugee camps had been established in the orchards for landowners and workers, collectively referred to as witches for now, while the damage to Nechi was assessed. It appeared to be extensive. Plans to create new foundations and level the ground had been underway within a day. A week after his ascension, a new council had been instituted with new representatives, a mix of landowners and workers, with progressive ideals. Changes included a restoration committee, appointees to represent the rights of the workers through the transition, and a new head of education. With diligent and steady work, Magnolia Castle's west wing had been restored enough for the High Priest to move back in. Today, the entire network closed the final door on their old lives. With a deep breath, Vittoria approached a marble sculpture that stood on a shelf built into the wall, La Principessa. She reached out with a soft smile and put her other hand over her heart. "Thank you," she whispered. Then she slipped out of the room and into the hallway with the quiet hush of her dress on the floor. Sunbeams escorted her through the marble halls and past paintings of previous high priestesses. Esperanza's was not among them. Vittoria's shoulders were back, her head held high. The skin on her knuckles prickled as she passed the portraits. She remembered her life of hot cauldrons, caustic potions, Andreas shouting at her. She thought of the mobs of the desperate, the needy, of the rage of the rebels, the fear of the landowners. They were still afraid, all of them. But a tenuous peace had settled on the land for now, which paved the path forward for negotiation and concession. Leaders had arisen from all areas. Education had started up immediately, so that workers would be able to represent themselves. Until they could, Vittoria would be their voice. She continued walking the path to her new life. Her mind was clear, her heart full. "I am," she thought, "the High Priestess." Mateo stood alone at a pair of double doors, clearly lost in thought. His hair was down, and it framed his stubbled face with long, shiny locks. He wore a freshly pressed white shirt under an emerald jacket, with black pants and dress shoes. Lines had appeared on his face from the stress of the last 2 months. He frowned too much these days, lost in the many cares and complexities of stabilizing his network. Regardless, he was elegance in male form, if she had anything to say about it. Mateo looked up when he heard her approach. A dazzling smile illuminated his handsome face. A new light burned in him now, the light of success, of dreams realized, of work accomplished. A flush of warmth spread from the top of her head all the way to her toes when he looked at her like that. She slowed as she neared him and stopped a few paces away, a half-smile lingering on her face. Mateo would have none of that. He strode to her, whisked her off her feet, and twirled her around. With a giggle, she clung to his strong shoulders. A tendril of hair escaped her bun and trailed across her cheek as he set her down. With gentle fingers, he brushed the hair from her eyes and tucked it behind her ear. "Are you ready, Mizuna?" "Yes." "You cannot go back after this." She smiled, tilting her head back. He held her hands in his, swallowing her small fingers in his capable ones. "I would never want to go back, only forward with you." Mateo pressed his lips to hers in a stolen kiss that sent heat all the way back to her toes. She leaned into him until his fingers slid into her hair. Seconds later, he pulled away with a raspy breath. "Later, my love. Now is not the time, or we'll make all of them jealous." She laughed and put some space between them. His eyes sparkled when he winked at her, then held out a hand. "Shall we, lady?" "Yes, Majesty." Mateo walked her to the double doors. Together, they peered into the room. Landowners sat on the left. Most of them were younger, forced to fill their pairs' positions after so many deaths in the uprising. Workers filled the room on the right. Their faces were scrubbed, clothes clean. Vittoria's parents sat in the front row. So did Sinara, Benat, Joska, Balta, newly appointed head of guardians, and Eneko, sitting on his mare's lap with a goofy grin. Some of the landowners averted their eyes, unable to look at Vittoria. She ignored their fear and uncertainty. They would not bring their prejudices to this day, nor this moment. She wouldn't allow them that power, not when they had taken it from workers for so long. Today was about taking a step forward, leaving that behind. Vittoria focused on what sat in front of her, her future, represented by 2 elegant golden chairs equal in size. The one on the left was inlaid with glimmering pearls of various widths and tones, and the one on the right boasted emeralds. "Mine is the one on the right," Mateo whispered with a roguish wink. Vittoria suppressed a laugh. He was convinced that their hand-fasting 2 weeks ago at the rubble of the Eliza of the Giver La Principessa had made him funnier. She couldn't deny him his humor now that it had space to emerge in a brighter world. "And mine," she murmured, "is right next to yours." He gripped her hand. "Where you will always be." Together, Vittoria and Mateo walked to the thrones. They turned, faced their audience, and sat down. Zaldar approached with a circlet of rose gold, carved with magnolia flowers, and knelt before Vittoria with a warm smile. "To our lady," he said. "May we always call you Majesty." Mateo reached over, took the crown, and carefully laid it on Vittoria's head. He stopped, pulled in a breath as he regarded her, then reached down and pressed a kiss to her hand. "I don't deserve you," he murmured, "my High Priestess." In all her life, Vittoria had never felt so light, so determined, so ready. With Mateo and her family at her side, she could do anything. From the back of the room, Balta called, "Presenting Her Majesty, the Levante maid Lady Vittoria Maria Antoinetta Guita of the Mayfair Coven, your High Priestess." This has been The High Priestess, written and narrated by Katie Cross. Copyright 2021 by Katie Cross. Audio production copyright 2022 by Katie Cross.